The Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, seems to be, for political opposition purpose reasons, saddling up and getting closer to China. The Canadian Prime Minister is hurting the people of Canada by being the way that he's being. I think that's a big missed opportunity for the people of Canada. And I think that him inviting Barack Obama was a real middle finger insult to President Trump. You have somebody who's really kind of acting like he's a member of the opposition party here in the United States. That's what's so frustrating about the Canadians right now. They seem to be kind of rooting against Western civilization.
In your conversations with Donald Trump, what has he told you about China and trade?
Journalism commentary 1 year anniversary.
I don't believe journalism being funded by the government is the solution.
You have to rebuild the foundation.
You have to retell the story.
Market conservative
Other news that actually matters.
I hence wanted to ask. I think they should answer their questions, especially if they're politically charged.
Is Mark Carney making a dangerous mistake that could damage the Canada-U.S. relationship and carry massive economic consequences for Canada? The truth is, many don't know because there is an iron wall in Canada when it comes to discussing Mark Carney's foreign policy, particularly on the Canada-U.S. file. By that I mean most of the media coverage in Canada only includes the Liberal Party of Canada's perspective on the files, on the Canada-U.S. file, and it is then echoed by the talking point pundits, including the so-called conservative lobbyists that are branded as strategists on outlets like CTV and CBC. Oh, Mark Carney's a great negotiator. Trump is evil. All of that type of narrative. And this iron wall comes as Canada heads into the most crucial part of our relationship yet, a monumental moment, and that is the negotiations for the CUSMA, the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement, that could end very badly if Mark Carney doesn't do a good job. And meanwhile, criticism, which is often very legitimate criticism coming from the United States, gets sidelined and often not even touched by the media, despite this criticism having the potential to be very important information for Canada and the future of its relationship with its biggest partner and ally and its neighbor, the United States. That is why today's guest is coming on the podcast. His name is Matthew Boyle, and he is the Washington bureau chief for Breitbart. This is one of the most well-connected journalists in the American conservative, Republican, and MAGA circles. He's interviewed Donald Trump multiple times and has a deep understanding of how prominent Republicans view Canada and view Mark Carney. I met him a few weeks ago. He was in Ottawa, and I had a conversation with him about the Canada-U.S. relationship, which blew my mind. And I was honestly like, there's no way I can keep this to myself. I have to share it with you, my audience. So I told him that we would have to sit down again, and we just did this morning. It's a perspective that many Canadians, unfortunately, have not yet heard, but that you will hear today. We discussed the Canada-U.S. relationship. We discuss Mark Carney's strategic partnership with communist China, how the Trump administration views Canada, and what are the biggest mistakes that Canada could make as it heads into crucial CUSMA negotiations with the United States. This is a fascinating conversation that's going to change the way that you view the Canada-U.S. relationship. So let's not waste too much time and get to it. But first, be sure you are subscribed, as up to 90% of my channel viewers are not subscribed. It takes literally a second and it's free to do so. Hype the video, like the video, hit the notification bell, and consider getting a channel membership for less than $5 a month, because I'm one of the only journalists left in Canada that refuses to take subsidies from the federal government, and it shows.
Well, Matt Boyle, thank you so much for joining me.
You bet. Happy to be here.
So you've interviewed Donald Trump before. What is he like in person, behind the scenes, and what do you think is the biggest misconception that Canadians have about him?
So he has a larger-than-life, very magnanimous personality. He fills up a room whenever he walks into it, whether it's just him or whether there's a whole entourage with him. His personality is very large, right? I guess on that front, that's a perception that people have out there about him, and so that's not a misconception. His sense of humor is unparalleled. Especially when the cameras aren't and he's just just chatting with people. He has a great sense of humor. And the thing that I would say is the biggest misconception, not just from Canadians but from anyone out there around the world, is that there's this perception of Trump that he's like this hard right, winger type person, and that he doesn't listen. I would say President Trump's greatest quality, in fact, is that he's an excellent listener. When you're having a conversation with President Trump, he asks excellent questions and he listens to everyone in the room. And I've personally witnessed it many times. I've had many conversations with President Trump. Sure, I've done the on camera or radio broadcast interviews type of thing with him. And when you do those, he more, adheres to the format and answers the questions and so on and so forth. You ask question, he answers question. You ask another question, he answers that one. But when you're having like a print interview conversation with him, which I've done a ton, he'll start asking you questions back. And I've had this happen a ton with him over the years because I've done a lot of interviews with him in a number of different formats, dating back over a decade now. And it's really fascinating to me because I always tell people he's the only politician that I've ever interviewed that asks questions back at me. Like, I'm a journalist. I talk to people. I ask questions for a living, but he asks questions too, and he asks good questions. He'll ask you what you think about this thing or that thing. What do you think how this is going to play? What do you think about this issue, or where are people at here? And I think that's one of his greatest qualities. It's something that the Canadians would do well to take advantage of, right? Like, I think going and having a conversation with the president is the best thing that the Prime Minister of Canada can do. And for whatever reason, we just haven't seen him really do that yet, right? Like, so it's like he's more embracing the left and the Democrat Party and the opposition rather than being the Prime Minister of Canada, right? Like, and so I think that would really, really help Canadians in terms of getting to places where we can work better together on things like trade, immigration, national security, stopping drug flows, standing up to China. I mean, the list goes on, but the fact is that instead you have somebody who's really kind of acting like he's a member of the opposition party here in the United States rather than acting like the Prime Minister of Canada. And so I think that's a big missed opportunity for the people of Canada, because again, I think that despite the narrative and the misconceptions out there against President Trump, the fact of the matter is he's really an inherently reasonable guy. And if you go in and you talk to him, he listens, and he may adjust course and do things a little bit differently and work well with you if you work with him. So that's one of the things I always tell people about President Trump is that, once you get in the room with them and you start talking to him, anything can happen, and good stuff usually does come of that.
That's very interesting. What do you think Trump and his administration, what do you think they think of Canada at the moment? How do you think they view Canada and its leadership?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the bigger picture is that President Trump is in a geopolitical chess match with China. And he just did a big state visit over there. President Trump has a great personal relationship with President Xi, to be clear. It's not like, I certainly don't expect any war to break out between the two countries or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is that it's a challenge. It is the challenge. Where Canada comes into this is that for whatever reason, probably, clearly, again, for what I was just kind of laying out before, the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, seems to be, for political opposition purpose reasons, saddling up and getting closer to China. He apparently made a secret deal with the Chinese, and he won't release the terms of this to the Canadian people. I mean, that's abhorrent. Right? Like, I mean, everybody in the West should be condemning Mark Carney, from the United States to Europe, etc., for that's inherently undemocratic, right? Like, it's like, so regardless of your politics, left, right, center, doesn't matter. The fact that you would make a secret deal with a Chinese dictatorship, right? Like a communist dictatorship, the terms of which you will not tell the public in Canada about is the antithesis of democracy, transparency that we believe in. The fact is that if you're gonna have deals with China, fine, but like, be open about it. So I think the concern is that Canada's maybe getting a little too close to China. The hope, I think, is that that might just be dumb partisan nonsense where, Mark Carney's siding with a lot of Democrats and just as a reaction to Trump, he's doing these types of things and that none of it's really going to hold and that eventually he's going to come back around and make a great deal that's in the interest of both Canadians and Americans, which, by the way, if we could get to a good deal for both countries, that's where I think President Trump wants to go. You see, the president has made great deals with the European Union, with the United Kingdom, with Korea, Japan, India, a number of Middle Eastern countries, and more around the world. I think that's where he wants to go with our friends in the Western Hemisphere as well, particularly Canada and particularly Mexico too. And so, there's a lot of talk as the USMCA is coming up and, whether or not we're going to get there. But the fact is that I think the concern is that they're getting too close to China. And the hope is that that's just a momentary flirtation. Working with communist dictatorships doesn't usually work out so well. And it ends up curtailing your freedoms. It ends up, look, there's some fundamentally different things about the way things work in China versus the way they work in the West. The fact is that there's no such thing as private ownership in China. There's only what the government allows to succeed and doesn't. Everything is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Everything is controlled by the government. And if they don't like a certain company or whatever, they'll just wipe it out and then they'll have a new one take its place. And that's not how it works in the West. That's not how it works in capitalists, Western democratic societies. So these fundamentally different worldviews do not work together. They just
Right.
don't.
Yeah.
And so the hope is that the Canadians will side with, eventually get over this partisan temper tantrum that we see, which is frankly unbecoming of a prime minister, right? Like, I mean, what we need to see is we need to see real leadership. Is Mark Carney the Prime Minister of Canada, or is he a member of the Democratic Party in the United States, right? Like, and right now he's acting more like a member of the Democratic Party in the United States, not the Prime Minister of Canada. He's not doing what's in Canada's interest. So what we hope is that he will wake up, change course, recognize that Barack Obama is never coming back. He will never be president in the United States again. That worldview has been crushed. Democrats here in the United States are in shambles, and that he will step up and represent the interests of Canada and make a great deal with President Trump, who represents the interests of the United States. And so if we can get to that really reasonable position, then hopefully, some of this stuff, bygones will be bygones. And again, that's the other thing about President Trump. He will forgive and forget pretty easily, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so
Well, we've seen that. We've seen
yeah.
that many times with like even some of the people who like ran against him in the past, and then he appointed them to cabinet and stuff like that. So I would agree with that.
In your conversations with Donald Trump, what has he told you about like China and trade?
Yeah, he's very careful what he says, especially when he's in office. So I've interviewed him a ton before he won the first time, during his first term, in between the two terms, and now since he's been back in the White House again. And I'm working on setting up our next one soon, which I hope will happen in the next several weeks or so. I don't know yet. But the point is like the when he's in office, I've noticed he's very careful about what he says, and so he won't necessarily explain it. And this is one of the things I always try to get them to explain it a little bit more, and to get him to explain it a little bit more. But when he's out of office, he'll talk more clearly and plainly about it. But one of the things I asked him when we were in Scotland last year. But one of the things we talked about during that interview was China, and I asked the president if he intended to go to Beijing or host President Xi here in the United States. He said he wanted to do both, and obviously now, since then, he has gone to Beijing, and later this year, he's expected to host President Xi here in the United States, and then there's likely to be 2 more bilateral meetings on the sidelines of bigger multilateral conversations in both countries. There's supposed to be a big event in China, I think in November, and G7 here in the United States in Miami in I think December. So we're expecting 4 separate occasions where the 2 of them are going to interact. But the fact is that The bigger picture here is that China, on a number of fronts, first off, has taken advantage of weakness from American presidents of both political parties, both Bushes, Clinton, Obama, Biden, to essentially drain the American industrial working class. If you drive around Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, these Rust Belt states, you will go see these empty factories or half empty factories or quarter empty factories or 3/4 empty factories, right? These places are if they're operational, they're operating at a percentage or a fraction of what they once were. And where it's not like these places are not functioning. They just moved over to China. And so what we've seen happen is China's taken commanding control of a number of different major manufacturing industries. So President Trump wants to see manufacturing in America again. We want to make stuff in America. You see, it's a huge focus of the Make America Great Again agenda. The president talks about this all the time. That doesn't mean decoupling. I don't think the president is interested in decoupling. He just wants to balance things out. He also is very focused, I think, on China's currency. China's currency is manipulated, again, by a centrally controlled government that is a communist dictatorship, right? And so that's a big thing. Energy is another big thing. So China doesn't make natural gas or oil. They don't have it there in China. They have to import it. So where are they bringing it in from? Places like Venezuela and Iran. And so I think a big part of why the president did what he did in both Venezuela and Iran, Venezuela, obviously a much quicker, cleaner operation, was to not deny China access to energy. I don't think the president's trying to hurt China. He's just trying to balance the equation so that way the United States is no longer raided and pillaged. And so again, that's kind of the big thing here is that he wants to revitalize American industrialism and not at the expense of China, but so that China's not growing at the expense of us. I think the president gets it in his bones. Like when you look at a map of the world and you start seeing, what China's doing and the moves it's making versus the moves the United States is making. So things like the president's moves in Panama or Greenland. I know everybody freaked out about Greenland,
Yes.
but all of those things are designed to strengthen the United States and to secure the Western Hemisphere. It's, you hear people talk about the Monroe Doctrine, right? Like it's a
Yes.
21st century version of the Monroe Doctrine. We need a strong United States. And this gets back to, again, to win this thing, if you believe in Western civilization, if you believe in the freedom of speech, you believe in freedom of religion, they don't have freedom of religion in China. If you like freedom of religion, you like freedom of speech, you like private business, you like success, you like the ability to move, to live the American dream, right? You're on Team America, right? So all of the rest of the Western world needs to unite and help support America getting strong because one side is going to win. And I think the president deeply understands this from my conversations with him, that one of the two sides is going to win this 21st century, debate and power struggle, if you will. It's almost a second Cold War. I don't know if the president would call it that, but it's basically a second Cold War. We're deep into Cold War II. And which side wins this thing is going to determine the fate of the world. And frankly, if you believe in all of those things that we're talking about here that are hallmarks of Western civilization, you really need to side with America. That's what's so frustrating about the Canadians right now is that they seem to be kind of rooting against Western civilization.
I do want to ask a follow-up because we're talking a bit about this. So in Canada, we have our upcoming trade negotiations for CUSMA or USMCA, as it's called in the U.S. And as this comes around, Mark Carney, and we talked about this a bit already, he goes to China and announces a strategic partnership. What do you think an action like that does ahead of important trade negotiations with the U.S.? Does that help Canada? Because it's a leverage point to say, if you don't deal with us, we'll deal with other countries, or could it actually hurt Canada's position?
No, it hurts Canada's position because it makes Canada feckless, right? It puts Canada in a position where they are now subservient and beholden to, again, this system that we're talking about that's fundamentally incompatible with, Canadian and American and Western values, generally speaking. So what we need to see and by the way, I would say not only that move by Carney, but in addition to that, the fact that he hosted Barack Obama in Toronto not that long ago. Barack Obama has not been the president for 10 years, okay? 10
Right.
years he's been gone. He's never coming back. I don't care what you think, right? Like, there's never going to be a moment where Barack Obama is the president of the United States again. Why hasn't he invited President Trump to Canada? Right? Like, I don't know if he has or not, but formally, but
There's
maybe.
never been. So Trump has been to Canada for like the big international meetings, but Trump has never addressed the Canadian Parliament, for example, whereas both when Biden addressed the Parliament, Obama had two kind of visits to Canada, but I've never seen Trump in Ottawa. He's never been
Right,
here.
but even if he's extended a formal invitation, he hasn't taken the steps necessary to try to build it out. Now, there's several things he could be doing that he could be helping Canadian interests, but he's undercutting the interests of Canadians, right? So it's like, and it's because of this Trump derangement syndrome that's infected the left, both in America here, you see it in the Democrat Party, but in the left in Canada too. But again, what he should do is rise above it, be the bigger man, and try to sort out, making a deal with the president of the United States. He's the duly elected president, and by the way, his vice president's probably going to be the next president, right? Like, so what we're seeing here is that the things that got Trump elected are here to stay in the United States, and this is going to become this is going to be the long-term view of the United States government. We'll see what happens in the midterm elections here, but regardless of that, pendulum swings, who knows? But the point is that regardless of that situation, as for the 2028 election, it looks as though J.D. Vance is the favorite to be the Republican nominee, and that Democrats are a mess. They don't have a candidate. They don't have somebody they can rally around. It looks like Kamala Harris is their leading person again. And so the fact is that, and if that happens, it's hard to see her win. And so you need a person to win a presidential election. And frankly, the view of President Trump is dominant here in the United States, and people want to see that type of worldview and that type of leadership that we're seeing from President Trump. The days of Barack Obama are ancient history. Right. Like, so, and I think that him inviting Barack Obama was a real middle finger insult to President Trump. It really
And it's
was.
not the first time they've done that too. The Liberal Party of Canada is the governing party of this country. At their national convention in 2023, they had Hillary Rodham Clinton give a keynote speech. They have this obsession with Democrats. If I may just ask one little challenging question, and that is, when Trump came into office and there was kind of the sparring with the first round of tariffs, at some point he had said, the U.S. doesn't need anything from Canada. We don't need their cars. We don't need their softwood lumber. We don't need their energy. If you have the president that says a claim like that, shouldn't they then expect that Canada would then go to some place like China and try to make trade deals?
And it's just Trump being Trump. Like, he throws out stuff like that all the time as part of negotiating. And by the way, once you have a deal, then you're already on to negotiating the next one before you even sign the first one, right? Like with Trump, everything's a negotiation, everything's a tactic. He's the guy who wrote The Art of the Deal. But you see this happening right now with the European Union trade deal, right? As I mentioned, I was there the next morning with the president, right after he signed it with Ursula von der Leyen there at Turnberry in Scotland. They're still going back and forth about the terms of the deal, right? Like, even though they've signed the deal and so on, everything's a negotiation with Trump. He's always trying to get more and negotiate more. And so, like, when he says stuff like that, that's a negotiating tactic. Similar type of a thing. You see it right now with the Iranians, right? He's going to get to a great deal with Iran. Very confident of that. And all these people that doubted the president on this were wrong. I'm very confident that we're going to get to a place where Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. It won't be like the Barack Obama failed deal, the JCPOA. It will be a real deal. But similar type of a thing here with the Canadians, right? It's always about getting to, negotiating, and he's using public comments. He's using different talking points. It's all about leverage. It's all about negotiating. And it's a constant negotiation with Trump. But that's just kind of how he approaches stuff. And again, this is what the American people want. They voted for this en masse, right? They voted for him in 2016. He won all the swing states. And then again in 2024, he won all the swing states and the national popular vote. So what you're going to continue to see is more and more of a doubling down, tripling down from the United States on Trump's worldview, even after President Trump. Yes, he's a president for the next 2.5 years, but the fact is that when the next time comes around, 2028, 2032, beyond, this is the dominant worldview in the United States, is what President Trump stands for. And frankly, a lot of other people around the world are doing a lot better at working with President Trump than the Canadian Prime Minister. And it's sad to see, because the Canadian Prime Minister is hurting the people of Canada by being the way that he's being, by being this partisan Democrat hack. Again, is he the Prime Minister of Canada, or is he a Democrat senator from New York City or something, right? Like, it's
Yes,
like, which
yes.
one are
No,
you?
I agree. There's been a lot of ill-advised actions on behalf of the Canadians. We have a media ecosystem here, Matt, that's very, very anti-Trump, very, very left-wing. A lot of it is funded by the government, and they've some of this media has began pushing a narrative that the U.S. wants to terminate USMCA, doesn't want any more free trade with Canada. Does that narrative have any credibility?
Well, there's a few things I would unpack there. First off, to answer your second point first, the president's made deals with basically, I think, north of 85% of world GDP has joined trade deals with the United States, Japan, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Vietnam, Korea. I'm leaving out some, right? Like, I mean, the president wants deals. So the idea that he doesn't want to deal with Canada is nonsense. It's, of course he wants to deal with Canada. But the fact is that to your point, the establishment media in Canada, it's sad to see. We have a similar problem in the United States. Now, the places like where I work at Breitbart and others have stepped up and really started, filling the void. And when I was up there and when I met you in Ottawa at the conference there a few weeks ago, it was exciting to see some young conservatives starting to speak out and use your voices. And so the reason why I'm doing your show right now is because I want to help you guys. And I think that there's good people on the rise in Canada. So you guys got to keep going and keep getting bigger, keep getting stronger, break news, and replace them, right? Like, because what'll happen is that they'll lose their power if you guys break more into stories and you guys take control of the narrative away from them. That's what we've done in America. The Breitbart can beat the New York Times and Washington Post combined on any given day, right? And we do it with less than 100 people that work here. They have thousands across both of those places. So just keep fighting, right? Like, because I'm telling you, you will win. The truth always wins at the end, right?
Yes, for
I
sure.
know
And
that the lies and the obfuscation from professional liars, they're going to continue. They'll get stronger. They'll get nastier. But the fact is that people crave truth. At the end of the day, that's what people want. The vast majority of people around the world, they want the truth. They want honesty. They want justice. And I think that you guys can do that. I really do. I believe in the young, great conservatives I'm meeting in Canada and elsewhere around the world. And frankly, you know what? We got to get a whole crew together. Well, I met some great young conservatives in Europe and Asia, in Latin America, and in Canada, and here in the United States. What we need to do is get everybody together and all learn from each other, right? I always say I'm an eternal optimist. The good guys win at the end of the movie every time. So hopefully you guys keep fighting, keep doing what you're doing, because you're going to win eventually.
no, I agree. One irritant of the U.S. has been Canada's various internet regulations and taxes on American web giants. And when you were in Canada, I showed you this. This is the Breitbart, where you were, the Instagram account that is blocked. And that's the case for every single media outlet in Canada that is blocked on Facebook and Instagram as a result of a piece of legislation called Bill C-18, the Online News Act. Like, what are your thoughts on this being a thing? And do you think this is something the Americans will pressure the Canadians to get rid of in a new trade deal?
Yeah. So first off, it's important. The fact that they have to use censorship to win is disgusting, and it's dictatorship like behavior, right? Like if they were so confident in their message, and they were so confident that our message was not good, not popular, they wouldn't have to censor us. The fact that they have to censor us shows you that they know that our message is better than theirs. Right. Like, so we don't have to engage in censorship of anybody to win. Right. Like, the only way that the radical left and these globalist elites win is by engaging in dictatorial type behavior. So, as for the specifics of negotiations, I hope so. I've raised what you showed me to a number of people here in the United States, and I'm continuing to do it. My hope is that is part of the negotiations, and frankly, even with the current law in place, the government in Canada right now, the Prime Minister should come out today, right now, and come out and say this is un-Canadian. This is un-Canadian. It's un-American. It's unbecoming of a Western civilization to engage in censorship like this, and we're going to lift it right away, right? Like, because one could think that they could make a judgment call today and lift it, even if the law was still in place, right?
Right.
Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's also anti-business. So here's what's happened. So if you're a news organization, you're now blocked on Facebook and Instagram. So when I lost my last job and I decided I want to start my own business, I was like, I can't really start a news organization because it's legislation. So I'm going to start a personal brand. And now there are some allegations, and this hasn't been verified, but they passed another law called Bill C-11, and this law is supposed to get the algorithms to promote so-called Canadian content. And there are some people that are saying, well, not on news, because when you upload video on YouTube, you have to pick the category, news and politics, that is going to prioritize news organizations, the ones that are funded by the government. So it's like, literally, it's a big FU to people like myself, because like, no, you can't start a news organization because we'll censor you, but you also can't start a personal brand or we'll censor you. Like, this is what causes people to get the hell out of Canada and move to America to start businesses. More Canadians are starting businesses in the U.S. now than in Canada, and there's a reason for that.
yeah, no doubt about it. But it's also the beginning of the end of the regime as it exists, right now. Look at what we just saw in the United Kingdom. So, yes, there were all sorts of other problems with Keir Starmer, and look, he's still technically the prime minister right now, but this guy's on his last legs, right? So but one of the things, and there were all sorts of other problems, like their ambassador to the United States, Mandelson, and the Epstein scandals and all that kind of stuff. And then there were other issues with the economy and other things and whatnot. But one of the biggest things that happened at the end of last year is it broke wide open everywhere that Starmer's chief of staff was at the center of an effort in the United Kingdom to censor Breitbart. Every time people try to do this, it doesn't work out for them, right? Like, because why? First off, they might succeed in temporarily, but eventually what ends up happening is it's part of a thing that is designed to just try to slow the inevitable, right? Like, what's the inevitable? Well, their policies are unpopular, their message isn't working, and our message is better. So what ends up happening is a Streisand effect, where people then turn to us. Right? Like the Streisand effect, right? Like, Barbara Streisand, where they pulled her off the Google Maps, and then everybody's like so interested in going to go see where she lives, right? Like, so it's similar type of a thing. If you do the censorship, then all of a sudden what happens is that people turn more and more elsewhere. But our message does get through in Canada beyond the social media companies, right? So censor at your own detriment, right? Like, I don't think it's a smart move for anyone to do. And again, it's a sign that Mark Carney knows, the Prime Minister of Canada knows, that Breitbart's more popular than he is among Canadians. And he knows that. And he has to engage in censorship to silence us personally, because he knows he can't win without it. So he's only barely grasping onto power because of the fact that his message is so unpopular. I don't think the people of Canada like secret deals with China. I really don't.
Yeah,
My guess is
unfortunately, you
that
don't hear a lot about it because the media doesn't cover it, right?
they don't come because they're all state funded, right? So the government tells them what to say and do, and so then they don't cover that story. But the fact is that I think people would very much like to see the terms of his arrangement with Beijing,
Yeah,
right?
I certainly would. My last question for you, Matt, is looking ahead, um, and I said specifically in terms of the relationships with Canada, the U.S., maybe even China, but mostly the Canada-U.S. relationship. What is the biggest mistake that Canada could make, in your opinion?
Just again, not representing the interests of Canadians because they've gotten, infected with Trump derangement syndrome. What they should do is they should put aside any of that nonsense partisan, crap and just go make a deal with the United States. Like Mark Carney should fly down to Washington, D.C. It's not that long of a flight. I did it. I did fly there and back in the same day. Okay. It's like a 90
There's
minute.
multiple flights a day too, because Dulles is a United hub. So I think there's like three to four flights,
Yeah, but
sometimes
he'll
even
have
five
the
flights a day.
official government plane, so it'll be even faster, right?
Yeah.
Like, so the fact is that he could come down here to Washington right away and come do a meeting with the president. I'm sure the president will take him and set up a meeting. I'm sure they could sort this out as soon as possible. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, Trump's an excellent listener. He wants to meet with people. He wants to talk to people. I'm sure that they could hash this out in a matter of an afternoon over lunch. But the Prime Minister of Canada hasn't been taking the steps necessary to do that. Instead, he's been trying to cozy up to communist dictatorships that are undercutting the Canadian people in secret deals, right? So he should release the terms of the secret deal he made with China immediately, and he should instead come to Washington and go make a deal with President Trump. And I'm sure he could do that in a heartbeat. But right now, we're not seeing that happen. So sadly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for your insights. I think the audience will
Mhm.
appreciate it as much as I do. So thanks so much. I'll put a link in the description so people can find your work, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
You bet.
Well, this sums up our interview. I really think that it's time to stop the messing around and get a deal done with the United States. So I have a little petition for you to sign to send Mark Carney a message that it's time to make a deal with the US and save the Canadian jobs. So that is below, the link for that. Also, comment your thoughts down below. I read most of the comments, if not all of them. I'll try to get back to a few of them and respond. I love hearing what my audience thinks. It helps kind of guide where I take the show, what you guys are interested in, what the media is not covering. So comment your thoughts down below. Be sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. Again, it takes one little click and it makes a huge difference for me and the algorithm. Like, hype the video, and consider getting that paid channel membership if you feel like it. That will also go a long way. Until next time, God bless.